Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Griffin. I am a member of the LGBTQIA plus work group. In my current role at Western Tidewater, I am a prevention specialist for the prevention department. I'll let Karen introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Karen Bailey. My work group is neurodiversity, and I am the autism ID manager, treatment manager in Western Tidewater.
Awesome. So, as Lara said, we're going to be talking about the clinical best practices work group and breaking down what we do and what we're about. And it should only take about an hour. It's not that long of a training. So, without further ado, we'll jump right in.
Yeah.
So, what is clinical best practices? So, the clinical best practices work group started at Western Tidewater in 2023, around the same time that CCBHC, STEP VA, and all this stuff started coming kind of to the forefront. And why these clinical best practices work groups were established to increase awareness on these different groups that the work groups target, to challenge some of our biases, to kind of look at that and make sure we're not creating barriers to care with that. We also wanted to respect everyone's individual differences and needs, addressing the barriers to wellness, ensuring that Western Tidewater as a whole is doing everything it can to promote wellness and self-care within our organization, and evaluating the growth of the agency. We don't want to become stagnant. We didn't want, as Western Tidewater and all this rapid growth came and CCBHC evolved, STEP VA evolved, we didn't want to just stop and do things the way we continue to do them. We wanted to ensure we were staying with the times and growing and doing things the best way possible.
So this is kind of funny because in the other trainings, we talked a lot about about going through each of these, this acronym of the core values, but we didn't just do that here. So we just want to kind of mention that as this is such a important part of the agency, that as you're going, we're encouraging the managers and leaders to how they conduct their meetings, that these meetings would be that they're looking at foresight, outreach, resourcefulness, well-being, accountability, results-driven determination as ways that they are implementing on the daily with, in their meetings, because those are foundation for our agency. And it's easy to rethink of that globally and not think of that on the daily.
We also operate each clinical best practice work group. This is the foundation of that work group. We try to evaluate forward for everything we do and ensure that we are exercising these core values and following this new standard. We have a video here. The title of the video is "What is Privilege?" So hopefully this video will play. If not, we're going to blame that on Chiquita because that's what I'm doing today. Hopefully it plays, and after it plays, we'll have a little discussion about it and kind of talk about how it made us feel and what we think about it. So let's see.
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
If you have ever tried to change your speech, if you were embarrassed about your clothes or house, if you would never think twice about calling the police when trouble.
I think privilege is when some people have some things and other people don't have things.
I feel privilege is something that you don't even really have control over.
I think it'd be silly for me to say I don't have a fair amount of privilege, considering like the country I live in and the job I get to do and the college I was allowed to go to.
I suppose being a white male will help me end up somewhere towards the front, but I'll take a few steps back from being gay.
I don't think I'll make it to the front. I think I'll maybe be in the middle. That's just the gut feeling I have.
If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you were embarrassed about your clothes or house while growing up, take one step back. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If you have ever been bullied or made fun of based on something you can't change, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you came from a supportive family environment, if you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, if you are able to move through the world without fear of sexual assault, if you took out loans for your education, if there were more than 50 books in your house growing up. So these are your final positions.
I think it felt kind of strange for everyone.
It's a hard thing to discuss or even reflect on.
It was very awkward. I think when you can represent it so visually like this and so immediately, it definitely takes on a new form.
I think we were like all joking around in the beginning. I was pretty lighthearted, and as soon as the questions started coming in, the mood shifted immediately, and we all it was just silent.
Just looking back and seeing like a bunch of people behind you is not a good feeling.
It's like weird how you want to like hold on to explaining a certain privilege, like, oh, but that's not actually me because like I had to work really hard for that. So it's weird to like take a step forward when you feel like you're taking a step forward with someone else, but you wear a lot of the baggage of like how those things were hard.
It was like more emotional than I thought it would be.
It reminded me of when they talk about slavery in high school and you feel like angry for a few days, but then you just realize like, this is how it is.
For me, it was kind of frustrating almost to look back and see how much further some people were behind me, and realizing that, you know, a lot of that stuff, no amount of hard work or even legislation can make up that gap.
It's interesting being an Asian American because you're not really sure where you fall on the spectrum of privilege.
I know that for me, one of the reasons I ended up so far back was that there were questions around safety as an African American, as a woman, as a gay woman. There are just so many different ways that I don't feel safe.
I feel like I just learned to be grateful for what you have. You know, we're in such a huge society where it's always complaining about what you don't have. It just shows you that for some families, like each family, you're meant to do better. My grandparents did good, my parents did good, and I'll do even better.
I do think if you're not like aware of privilege, you should do this exercise, but it's more complicated.
So what are our thoughts? Anybody have any thoughts about that video or anything they want to share?
So I think this is something we should do in person. I think it would be really good to have ourselves and our other employees, because it's such a visual, obvious thing. So I liked it.
I like that. Latrell, I believe it was, shared that at somewhere she had worked previously, they had done it in person, and she spoke. It was very powerful, she said. So, anybody else? Anything else? Any other thoughts?
I think that, I can agree that it was very powerful. I do also think that it can like bring on certain type of triggers and emotions as well. If you get like everybody together to see exactly where you fall. So, you know, while it's a good thing to do, I think it would bring like a lot of emotional stress involved as well.
That's some of the things that we talked about when we were, in person doing the training, is that it's quite vulnerable. I mean, you know these people in a certain way, and then all of a sudden, like there's these questions are being asked that are pretty intimate. When if these are your coworkers, they don't typically know that kind of detail or in that kind of category, the way that the questions are asked.
Absolutely. So, I love that video, and the first time I watched it, it kind of changed how I looked at the clinical best practices work groups. To me, it changed. I knew the basis of the work groups. I was in the work groups. I was doing the work. But once I saw that video, I changed my lens kind of to the point of them being, we don't want our privilege to create a barrier to care for the people we serve. We don't want our lack of knowledge or our lack of clinical best practices to create a barrier to anyone that walks through the doors at Western Tidewater. So it's a very powerful video, and I can't imagine actually doing it in person myself, because I'm not sure I would be able to truthfully take a step forward or step back based on those questions, because as Karen said, it's coworkers. We know each other, but we don't know each other in that lens. So very interesting, very powerful. So thank you guys for watching. So why do we need clinical best practices? As we've been saying, to prevent those barriers to services, to ensure that we're looking at everyone with the same lens and treating everyone the same when they walk through the doors at Western Tidewater. Different barriers to service, financial difficulties, a lack of knowledgeable providers, language barriers, the stigma that a lot of these groups we're going to talk about carry, a lack of diversity and cultural responsivity, and a lack of continuity between providers and services. And this is all stuff that clinical best practices is looking at and evaluating and trying to better how we perform it. We talked about earlier too that culture of stagnation. We don't want to become stagnant in our care. We didn't want to just, this is how we do it, it's been established, and this is how we're going to do it. We need to evolve, we need to change, and we need to constantly look at how we do things and become better. Disconnected work groups, a lack of employee input. Part of the clinical best practices work groups were that employee survey that came out. It kind of created another work group, which was the survey and assessment task group. And they put together that employee survey and it went out to all employees. We got back some great feedback, and was Chiquita was able to create something and send out to everyone that you should have seen. Employee dissatisfaction. Isolation of employees. We've talked about a lot in these manager trainings, kind of our silos and how we're siloed across the agency and in different areas. Narrow focus and outdated practice, that ties right back into that stagnation. And poor productivity across the board.
So one of the work groups is agency and contracting. So this work group has a responsibility for understanding the agency's role within the community and highlighting the needs, as well as upholding our specific license mandates. And so that's the main focus. So the agency contracting has helped create the care coordination guide, which for the agency, which is currently displayed in the employee portal. They assisted in the employee surveys, and and many of those who are involved in the agency contracting work group are a part of the other best practice leads, as well as leaders throughout the agency. As this group is comprised of many of the leaders throughout this work group, CCBHC.
Sorry,
It's
that's
okay.
me. I was trying.
We love humanity. Nothing has to be perfect, but basically that we're all it's working with these work groups as well as CCBHC work group and the 988 work group, and so that there's a consistency throughout the agency. We'll be more focusing on the other 4 work groups as the remainder of the training.
All right, so the 4 work groups that we're going to talk about today are the Family Support Work Group, the LGBTQIA+ work group, the Neurodiversity Work Group, and the Substance Use Disorder Work Group. So we're going to jump right into these. Before we get started, if anybody in here is a member of one of these work groups, when we get to them and start to talk about them, if we miss something, we may not have the knowledge of your most current meetings and what you guys have been talking about, please feel free to come off mute and jump in, and any information you can add, we'd love to have it. So we're going to go ahead and get started on these. So the Family Support Work Group, the members of this work group are Michelle Moore, Justina Lambert, Heather Parks, Chelsea Jefferson, Jamal Smith, Leslie Malav, and Adam Burton. So what is the Family Support Work Group? The purpose of this work group is to educate families on the access to services, working together to encourage collaboration amongst team members, and how we share our internal events with our clients. So our prevention events, our different outpatient groups, and any upcoming trainings that Western Tidewater or Region 5 is offering. So I kind of look at this work group almost as our marketing work group. It's kind of, although that is a separate work group, but this kind of looks at how we're marketing ourselves, how we're spreading what Western Tidewater is to the community, and how we're evaluating what the community needs and how we can provide that to them. So Family Support Work Group, as all the work groups do, utilize the forward core values to increase the accessibility to service access, decrease stigma around mental health, and increase the public resourcefulness and community presence. The goal is to bring awareness to the internal resources that Western Tidewater has with an outcome of greater individual, family, and community engagement. So again, the purpose is how we're interacting with the community and how we're getting them engaged into Western Tidewater services and letting them know what we as an agency offer. So upholding the best practices within this work group is identifying deficits in the community. So they have created a survey to kind of gauge our service areas and what those service areas most need. What does that area have a need for as far as resources that Western Tidewater can provide? Increasing awareness of the resources that we already have. Maybe they need something that Western Tidewater already offers, and they're just not aware that we offer that. And problem-solving ways to improve the barriers. You're going to see that a lot as we continue going through this presentation. How do we identify the barriers and problem solve our way through those so we're not creating, an issue when people need to access care? So one thing you may have seen the Family Support Work Group do is WT Talk, kind of like a little podcast thing that we're doing. I think the first one has been up on YouTube and Facebook. If you guys don't follow Western Tidewater on Facebook, we do have a Facebook page. Region 5 has a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a TikTok page. So follow those. That's a great way that a lot of our stuff gets posted. That's ways you can share things to different groups that you may be a member of. That's free marketing. That's free way to spread the word on what Western Tidewater is doing and help get more people into care. So they've been doing these WT Talks video segments. These are some of the topics they've done. They've done one on men and mental health. They've done one on AI and mental health, toxic positivity. They've done an LGBTQ plus one, how to find the right therapist, and horticulture and mental health. And I think we have a video here. We're probably going to have another is it going to play moment. But we do have the how to find the right therapist video that the Family Support Work Group did. So we're going to play that for you now.
Good.
My name is Leslie.
And I'm Jamal.
And welcome to WT Talk. I want to introduce today two licensed therapists.
Hello, I'm Justina Lambert, and I'm an LPC here at Western Tidewater.
Hi, I'm Michelle Moore. I'm an LCSW here at Western Tidewater.
And today we'll be talking about finding the right therapist for you.
Okay, so what would you say the role of a therapist is? Because sometimes it may seem confusing to people who may think, I'm coming in here, I'm going to tell the therapist my problems, and they're going to fix it for me. Are you fixers? Or like, what would you classify your role as?
That's a good question. I would just stick with we are counselors. The client is the one who is the author of their life. They are the expert on their life. We really come in and just kind of try to like clear away some of the fog, because sometimes what it is so much noise before the client can say, oh, I see the path. So we just are helping to kind of like clear away the noise. I don't know what else with that.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense, because sometimes when you're in it, like you don't see what's going on, and some of the obstacles you may be creating for yourself as well. So
that's perfect.
So I'll piggyback off of Justina. So if you went to my Psychology Today profile, it says that I come alongside you on your journey, right? And so my job is not to fix it, but to come alongside you and to help you, as Justina said, just to kind of work through some of the fog and to help you meet your goals and whatever that looks like for you, right? Because my job is not to take over for you, but to kind of help you sort through some of the things, peel back some layers, and to help you on recovery and whatever that looks like.
And why is it important to have that boundary where you're not the one kind of fixing it or telling them what to do?
Sustainability, right? So like I can't fix the problem, because when I'm gone, then it's not going to last, right? So it has to be something that the individual creates something that they want to work on, because the overall goal is for them to not be in therapy forever, right? And so when someone is invested in their treatment, then they're going to continue to work on it.
I love that you said that.
Yeah.
Therapy is not forever. I think there is an idea for people that they need to be in therapy for the rest of their lives.
So that's just one of the WT Talks videos they recorded. They recorded quite a few of them, and they should be coming out. That, of course, was Justina and Michelle. So they're both in this meeting, so you guys get your signatures while you can.
I also want to shout out Justina because she is the clinical lead for Family Support Work Group.
Absolutely. So those are awesome. I love the videos. I've recorded one myself. Everyone that I've seen so far, I've walked in on them recording, they're going to be great. It's a great way to spread the word and spread information on what Western Tidewater is doing. Another thing the family support is looking at is having those play on the TVs in the clinics. So again, that's great. While someone may be sitting or waiting, that's spreading awareness, that's spreading information on Western Tidewater. So of course, that's Leslie and Jamal doing the videos, but it is a group effort. They have the whole room full of people in there when they are recording those. So I can't wait for more of those to come out. And as you saw, those are on YouTube as well as being shared on our social media platforms. So the next work group is the LGBTQIA+ work group. The members of this work group are me, Charlene Cutting, Chiquita Merrill, Karen Duncan, Nicole Wilkins, and Sandra Denise Allen. So LGBTQIA is an acronym that refers to individuals who identify outside of the heteronormality. That acronym broken down, of course, is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, and asexual. It is important to note that LGBTQIA as an acronym does represent the above sexual orientations or gender identities, but it is not all encompassing. There are several gender identities and sexual orientations that are not captured in that acronym, but are members of that community. As always, Western Tidewater as a whole, it is our job, regardless of sexual or gender orientation, when someone walks through the door, to provide the best care we can and the best resources to anyone, and ensuring that we are a safe space. So some facts about the LGBTQIA+ population. Suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst young people ages 10 to 14, and the third for ages 15 to 24. LGBTQIA young people are at a significantly increased risk for suicide. The Trevor Project in 2019 estimated that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ+ young people between the ages of 13 and 24 seriously consider suicide each year in the US. LGBTQIA+ young people are more than 4 times as likely to attempt than their peers. And 4.5% of the Hampton Roads population identify as LGBTQIA+. So that's just some facts of why this work group is important and why we are looking at this specific group of people and how we provide care and challenging those biases that we have. When providing services or interacting with the community at any level, it's essential to be aware of different sexual and or gender orientations and how they impact a person's culture. So when we talk about that, we're providing clinical care. If someone walks in and they're a member of this community, or maybe they are outside of the normality for what we consider in relationships, perhaps they're in a polyamorous relationship. If we're not a safe space and they don't feel that they can trust that information with us, that's creating a barrier to care. If that is part of the issue, if that's part of the reason they're seeking counseling and they can't share that with us, we're not going to truthfully be able to help them without the full story. It's also important to note and respect each individual's cultures, their values, and their beliefs, and ensure we are offering the best care possible by respecting these views. So that's when we start to talk about biases, our unconscious biases, conscious biases, laying them down at the door and ensuring that we're putting the person first in this clinical best practice. So how do we implement clinical best practices for the LGBTQIA+ community? Being aware of our own biases, conscious and unconscious, as I just said, and leaving them at the door, not letting them affect how we provide service to individuals. A review of our agency's policies and procedures. So this also kind of has another work group that's come along, which is the policy and procedure work group. And the purpose of that work group is to look at the agency's policies and procedures and ensure that they're up to date in their wording and how they reflect individuals, make sure they're all encompassing. Training and education. So this work group is also looking at different training opportunities that we can implement for the agency and new employees that come on, a little bit of cultural training. And last but certainly not least is the resource centers at each location. So these have started popping up at some of our office locations. Right now it has some books in there. We're collecting resources from different agencies in our catchment area, such as the LGBTQ Life Center, PFLAG, stuff like that. And those resources will start going into these centers. And that's just somewhere that if someone needs a resource, it's right there. They can go, they can grab it, and they have access to that. So with that, we're at neurodiversity. So I'm going to hand it over to Karen.
Sounds good. So the first work group we're talking about is neurodiversity. Oops. And
that's me. I'm trying to give you control.
Oh, you're giving me control. Okay. The team members of this work group is Bernadette Ward, Amanda Grocott, and myself. As you see, we are a smaller group. We were a little bit bigger. So if you know anyone who is interested in this area and shows that they want to be involved, please let us know, or please approve them being involved, as this is a important area in our agency. So this is a team dedicated to developing treatment in various parts, which I think is throughout the agency. Actually, every part of the agency will be is affected by neurodiversity, whether they know it or not. It's because everybody, we just don't always know where people's diagnoses are, or where they could use some extra support. Neurodiverse population in our agency includes autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disability, traumatic brain injury, and attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity. I like to say them sometimes out loud, not just the acronyms, so that we remember, what's really kind of important about those. So I wanted to just explain a little bit what neurodiversity is, because that's a pretty new word on the scene. I would say, I've been working with those on the autism spectrum for almost 20 years. It'll be like November would be 20 years. My first client that I had the privilege of being a part of getting them diagnosed with Asperger's. And I would say neurodiversity is a pretty new word, and it's a grassroots word that doesn't just we think of autism first, but it's really also includes ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, Tourette's, dyspraxia, gifted. It's really kind of recognizing that there's a neurological differences. It's not just a little bit like just on their behavior is a little different. Back in the olden days, I say, when I first learned about autism, it was really like it's a social skill behavior. It's social skills. It's like, well, they're kind of awkward. It's all on their behavior. But as we are understanding the brain better, and we understand how those things go together, that we recognize that that autism is much more of a neurological disorder. And although you don't go to a neurologist to get tested for it, it is a part of their nervous system. That's why, and that's where we're looking at these other disorders, especially like ADHD, which typically people look at it as the person's behaviors. Well, and it's really more than that. It's really more internally and how they process things and how they struggle with them. And that's why I'm such an advocate, because so often they're misunderstood. And so I would say that also that neurologically, their makeup is, there's just a little bit different. So what I'm learning about through my research that I do regularly is that there's just much more to learn. about the brain and how it affects those who are neurodiverse. Neurotypical is just another definition that I like to bring out because it really relates to those who are most like everybody. But at the same time that we say that, I would say I'm neurotypical in the sense that I'm not autistic. It is true neurodiversity is recognizing that there is a little bit difference for all of us and kind of accepting those differences and being aware of those. So some facts about autism. This prevalence of diagnosis has increased in the US by 312% since 2000. As of 2020, there are 17% of children ages 3 to 17 in Virginia are diagnosed with autism. And 1 in 36 children and 1 in 45 adults in the autism are autistic. Females with autistic females have a 3 times more likely, they're more at risk for suicide than females that are not autistic. And this was through a study that was done between 2013 and 2017. Because generally speaking, females mask or they are more socially oriented than their male counterparts. They typically are diagnosed later, and they usually don't, because they kind of learn to adjust and they mask a lot of their more autistic traits, and so they're not noticed right away, and often are later diagnosed, which I think also is a part of why the risk is there, because they're misunderstood and they're not in that time. So what do we do in the neurodiversity with work group for best practices? So our main goal with all of these is really recognizing that to bring dignity and respect to the neurodiverse population, that we are advocates, that we recognize when there's personal bias, as well as accepting others' differences, recognizing that sometimes personal differences aren't just like preferences, like, I like a milkshake and you like a sundae when we go to the ice cream shop. It's really more about like they have different needs, and sometimes they can easily be dismissed because we don't understand. So that's really why it's important that we are becoming aware of those things. Even the things like you see that the light on, I'm in one of the offices at Harborview. This light, sometimes some of my clients like this light on, sometimes they like the littler lights. Part of that's because those are things I ask, because that can really distract somebody who has sensory issues. And I like to, and so that's one of those things I ask and want to just be that awareness in that way. So also we're making awareness we're looking at protocols of the agency, procedures and standards, so we can recognize these things. So one of the things we've been doing has been reviewing the employee handbook to increase employee accessibility in that way. Our main goals are removing barriers to service, and this includes training protocols on neurodiversity for every employee, creating more sensory sensitive spaces, interpreting behaviors, so recognizing that what neurodiversity can look like, which means, if you see somebody who's rocking or pacing, that it's not always like an aggressive move. It's not always that even if you hear somebody talking to themselves, which, typically we would think of as, in a situation like of schizophrenia and some other kind of psychosis, but that's not unusual for those who are autistic, because they're thinking and they're processing. And sometimes that need for that sensory movement is important to them. It's a way for them to kind of have their nervous system kind of reset. And if they're anxious, they're pacing, they're moving their hands, any of the stemming behaviors helps them to kind of calm themselves. So that's one of those things that we are really, just educating. And also recognizing that how we can support people in neurodiversity, which can mean that we take breaks when we're having an appointment, when we're trying to complete something, recognizing that what might be okay for a typical adult to handle this much time and doing this in a meeting, they might need a break. That might be, they may need to move around a little bit. They might not need to typically just sit in a session or in a meeting and just answer questions. They need to move around. I had one client that she used to like to walk around while we were in session. And I knew that was just because, and she explained it, that was part of her need to stem. When she was moving, she could focus on me more. And so being able to be accepting that. And also just having different organizational tools that are often more visual. So having something written down can be more helpful than just hearing it. And so that's what, those are things I often will teach in my in the trainings that I teach. So as we move on, our last group is the substance abuse disorder. This the team members of this group are Brittany Johnson, Charlene Cutting, Kara Majid, Demara Beckett, and Stephanie Harrell. So substance abuse disorder is a treatable mental disorder that affects a person's brain and behavior, leading their inability to control their use of substances like legal or illegal drugs, alcohol, or medication. Symptoms can be moderate to severe, with addiction being the most severe form of SUD. According to the 2022 United States Survey on Drug Use and Health, 46.8 million Americans aged 12 and older battle with substance abuse disorder in the past year. In 21, there was 2,230 opiate overdose in Virginia, which accounted for 85% of all overdose deaths in the state. When we were looking at how many programs are involved in what, our agency with the SUD population, it's like most of them. There's probably a few exceptions with the early intervention or something of that nature, but for the most part, all of our programs need to be aware of substance abuse disorder, because they all can have clients from that population or with those issues. Why do we need best practices for SUD? This again offers a standard of guidance, guidelines, and recommendations to improve care, making sure those standards are upheld, ensuring each provider practices our core values and principles, and for ongoing vigilance. We promote continued education and personal inventory for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it also identifies and corrects any personal bias in our person-centered professional work environments. Western Tidewater has a deep respect and compassion for the SUD population. This includes not only to our clients, but also to our staff with lived experiences. Western Tidewater strives to create safe environment that promotes confidentiality, accountability, awareness, education, ethical standards, best practices, and evidence-based methods to promote resilience and recovery. Western Tidewater employees, you are not just aware, but also accountable and committed to breaking this stigma. We have a strict zero tolerance policy against discrimination against persons with SUD. This policy ensures our clients feel safe and secure and protected in with our services, and they're accessible to all. How do we implement these best services? We have the work group that is dedicated to helping this SUD population. We are always reviewing the agency's core values, again, for training and education, and using cohesive and smart collaboration between the clinics and other programs, and future planning for changes to come through CCBHC and STEP Virginia. So we've given a lot of information. We wonder if you have any questions, feedback, and we are here for that.
So that was a whole lot of information piled into one, and it's kind of hard to capture truly how much the work that the work groups are doing. and the effect that they're going to have. So we thank you guys for listening. If you don't have any more questions, if you do have a question and you don't want to ask it in person, please feel free to email Karen and I or anyone that's a member of these work groups. If you or yourself has staff that you think would be a good fit for one of these work groups, please send that to us too. We're always looking for new members. We're always looking to grow and get new ideas, new people at the table, so we can continue these collaborative discussions and evaluate clinical best practices as a whole. Again, thank you guys. That was a lot of information in a little bit of time. If you have any questions, please let Karen or I know.